Hey everyone, in this episode we're going to talk about Dan Fogelman's newest film, Life Itself. We're going to talk about the cast, the film's underlying themes, and we're going to talk about why the critics are bashing it so hard. This is episode 78 of the Reel-ists Podcast. Hey everyone,
welcome
to
the Reel-ists
Podcast.
I think I took two words.
Oh, you said the Reel-ists?
The Reel-ists.
It's all right. We didn't really plan that or anything, so it was just improv. I am Donnie.
And I'm Oscar.
And we have our producer, Ruben.
Hello.
Hello, Ruben said. And you're listening. You're listening to the Reel-ists Podcast. So if it's your first time listening, welcome. We really appreciate having you here. And if it's not your first time, we appreciate that you came back.
You support us.
And yeah, day in, day out.
As Donnie says,
rain, sleet, or snow.
As he said in previous episodes, that we know that there's a lot of podcast choices, so we're glad that you have chosen us.
Yes.
To spend a good 30 to 40 minutes, maybe more, depending on the episode.
Give or take. Could be a 29-minute. We don't know. Never know. It just depends on what we got to say. But thank you guys so much for supporting us. I just want to quickly remind you guys before we jump into this episode, we are on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Team Reel-ists. I'm going to spell it this episode because Oscar didn't spell it last episode, which is fine. We spell it all the time. You guys should know it by now. But in case you don't, it's Team REELISTS, no dash. I almost messed that up. Are we sure I spelled that right?
One episode we don't do it and we're thrown off.
Right? I know, seriously. I was like, oh, wait, how do we spell this again? I forgot, guys. It's been a while.
It's been too long.
We are also on iTunes.
Apple Podcasts.
Podcasts. So you can drop us a comment or rate us. And we are on YouTube. You can drop us a comment there as well. We'd love to hear from you as always.
Sure, you can subscribe to us there too as well.
Speaking of YouTube, check out Oscar's YouTube channel, Another Comic Fan.
Oh, yeah.
Just wanted to throw that out there quickly since we were in the YouTube field there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's all comic book content. So if you're a comic book fan, another place we can listen to me more.
If you just want Oscar. If you don't want any Donnie or Ruben, then...
It's all Oscar production.
Yeah, all Oscar.
Does comic book news and reviews.
Sweet.
I should have a slogan. Oh, I do kind of already.
What's your slogan?
Just remember, I'm number the comic fan.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He's just another comic fan, guys. So I don't think we have any housekeeping, so I think we can just jump right into
the spoiler discussion.
Yes, it is going to be a spoiler, so you know what to do. But we are going to be talking about the film Life Itself.
Life Itself.
Let's just let that sink in for a minute.
Because we're talking about our life itself. We ain't going to talk about this movie. We're going to talk about our...
Sorry if it seemed misleading. We're not going to actually talk about the film. We're going to just talk about my life and Oscar's life. Maybe if we have time, Ruben's life.
Let's start. So, Donnie was born in 1991 at Kaiser Permanente in Vallejo, California.
It was a Tuesday. 76 degrees outside. No, but seriously, the film Life Itself, directed by Dan Fogelman, had a star-studded cast: Olivia Wilde, Oscar Isaac, Olivia Cook, Annette Bening, Antonio Banderas, and some other actors who I don't know their names off the top of my head.
But they're not stars.
But they were, I mean, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they've been...
They're climbing.
They're rising stars. But it was just an intense movie. Oscar, as always, why don't you give us some quick thoughts on what you thought of this one?
This one was... So I think I've seen the trailer maybe once. So I kind of was like, I'm going into it with just the idea that it's going to be one of those, movies that have you think about reflect on life or, kind of see something from a different perspective. But man, does it hit you hard with emotions. And we say this because it's by the same person, but it's very This Is Us. Impact
extended edition.
It's like the sister of the show, but it really drives home a lot of messages that it kind of wants you to take away about the things in life that you go through. The opening to this movie definitely was probably the biggest flaw that it has. It was just a very random way to start it with the cameo of Samuel Jackson, but as the movie progressed, it wanted to tell you stories that connected all together, but I feel like it was becoming too much of different stories that barely make a connection because you're forcing it to, rather than a natural intertwined story. So it was nice to kind of see these individual stories, but there's a lot of things that I can see why it has been critiqued harshly. But no, the performances were very nicely done. I believed in the relationships a lot of these characters had. Biggest like theme of death that I've seen recently in a movie,
a lot of death,
and a lot of like how to cope with it in various ways.
Not even like she died peacefully in her sleep. This was like tragedies.
Yes,
decapitations,
absolutely.
Car crashes, people being hit by buses, suicide, gunshot to the head. I mean, it was like brutal.
Yes. Yes, it was. But yeah, that's just my overall thoughts. That it was very emotional. For what it wanted to drive home. It did that successfully, but as a movie, I felt like it forgot that it was a movie and not a TV series because it worked well for This Is Us. And we'll explain more detail, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's been the biggest reason why critics are just being so harsh with it, because it is very much like This Is Us. And the biggest argument has been that, yeah, those intertwining stories and that sort of aspect of storytelling works for television, where you can watch it play out and you can see it ebb and flow and just kind of go naturally. But when you're trying to cram all of that into under 2 hours, it just doesn't translate quite as nicely as you would think it would.
Yeah.
So unfortunately for Dan Fogelman, a lot of people weren't buying it.
I think I'm assuming that he just thought the same Kool-Aid would work as a movie release. And I guess,
and I don't blame him. I mean, everybody loves This Is Us. I mean, it's.
But loves to see it intertwined on a small screen, apparently.
Yeah, right. on a weekday night or a weeknight.
I will say it is becoming tougher with movies and shows to be separated, because a lot of shows are starting to have a lot of movie-like cinematic feel to them.
Yeah.
Like Game of Thrones is probably like the best example, where you feel like you are watching, this experience that you don't really get on any other shows. It's not like your common, law procedural, cop show, or it's not your common, coming of age ABC sitcom, or it doesn't have those kinds of common storylines. So it is kind of slowly mixing in, but I feel like the biggest.
Well, I feel like too. I mean, we're just in a day and age where movies a lot of them are just about the big blockbusters and the franchises. That's just where we're at with movies right now. We did an episode talking about movie franchises.
Check it out.
Check that episode out if you like. But we were talking about that, so it's like I feel like there's just been a shift where all these storytellers and writers that want to tell these kind of stories have just gravitated towards television, and there's so many platforms for television aside from just cable television. And we have Netflix, we have Hulu, we have Amazon Prime or Amazon TV or whatever.
Yes. Showtime, Stars.
I mean, just there's so many avenues and outlets for them to tell stories. So I see why we are getting really great quality television and series, limited series, and so yeah,
just look at the Emmys and see what gets nominated. Those a lot of shows are not even just basic cable network shows anymore, and so it's expanding. And so the thing with the movies though, it has to give you a reason to why you should see this in the theater, why you should go pay to see this.
Right.
When a lot of
why I should leave the comfort of my home.
Yeah.
To go sit in a theater and watch it on the big screen and be fully immersed in it.
And generally, the common reasons for that is the scale of the story. The biggest examples are the blockbusters. Things that have a lot of effects, then things that have just a lot of things for you to see and that need to be shown on a big screen compared to a small screen, where you might miss out on the details. And also, the performances are generally geared with actors that have proven, not all, but most have proven, that they can bring, these visuals. They can complement these visuals and these story elements, that these set pieces that is coming up, in the same way that actors on a theater stage can make the performance still feel alive and exciting. So yeah, so generally those are the two common reasons for that. Although the actor side of it is starting to get a little bit lost with visual effects. Mm-hmm. So because a lot of things are now being able to be done visual effects, where we just need a voice.
Yeah. That's kind of annoying.
Animation.
That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, you're absolutely
Check that
right.
episode coming out soon. A real conversation.
Be on the lookout for that. Just to give you guys a synopsis, college sweethearts Will and Abby fall in love, get married, and prepare to bring their first child into the world. As their story unfolds in New York, fate links them to a group of people in Seville, Spain, including a troubled young woman, a man and his granddaughter, a wealthy landowner, and a plantation manager.
So I think this is going to be one of those movies that we need to break it down for our listeners. Chapter 1.
Yeah.
That's how the movie does it.
This movie was told in pretty much 4 chapters.
Yes.
Technically 5 if you... or
No, it was technically 3 with the 4th one being... oh, no. Yeah, you're right. 5. Because the first one
is like the
parents of the...
Well, I was talking about the first 10 minutes. Like that was... I know that wasn't a chapter, but it was kind of like... But anyways, let's just break it down.
It was an ugly prologue.
Let's just break it down. It was Will and Abby. So that was Oscar Isaac and Olivia Wilde falling in love.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 2 was the daughter Dylan Dempsey.
Yes.
The chapter 3 was...
the Spanish guy and the family. His family.
Was it the little boy?
Well, no, it was the family. The Rodrigo... The Gonzalez family.
Yes.
So it was the entire family storyline.
And then chapter 4
was Rodrigo's specific story. And then
chapter 5 was
their daughter.
The daughter of Dylan and Rodrigo.
Spoiler right there. Boom.
Bam.
So.
All right. So, yeah. So, I mean, Jesus. I don't even know where to start, Oscar. This movie was... It started off on such a crazy, like, out of the box kind of like, we were like, what is going on? We had Samuel L. Jackson narrating this kind of, we weren't sure what it was. And he was like narrating this for us. And he was like pushing on this person and being, just kind of wacky.
Yeah. Almost like a parody to some extent.
It was kind of, So that was like the first 10 minutes. And then we realized that Oscar Isaac's character, Will... Yes. He was typing this kind of story out. So that's what we got in the first 10 minutes was his story he was trying to write. So basically, chapter 1 is this guy, Will, and he's going to therapy. He just got released from a mental institution because they said his wife left him. And he was heartbroken and devastated. And he was definitely, because it turns out she did not leave him. She died.
Tragically.
Surprise.
First
tragically. Death. That was like the first tragedy. She got hit by a bus and she was pregnant with their child. So... I was like, dang. So then he's going to therapy, seeing Annette Bening, who was great, love her and everything she does. Love Oscar Isaac too. I don't want this episode to turn into like we're retelling the whole movie, but basically he shoots himself. That was like one of the... I did not see that part coming.
No, I didn't.
Because it happened pretty early in the film. Like this was only chapter 1. So we were only like a quarter into the film. And
based on how the first 10 minutes went, I was like, oh, maybe
it was kind of comical, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like dark humor, kind of comical. He was saying a lot of outlandish things that were kind of making us giggle here and there. And him and his therapist, Annette Bening, had a good little banter. And then he kept talking about his wife, Abby.
They gave us the story of his wife.
And and it seemed like she left, but up until it was revealed towards the end that she had died. Towards the end of that chapter that she died. So he was like, this is too much. I don't want to be here anymore. And it looked like he was just going to leave. And she was like, trying to calm him down. No, sit down. Then he just pulls out a gun and bam, like it happened so quickly. I do like that it did happen so quickly. I told you this when we were walking out of the theater, but like when people do those things, I think it is very... It's not like it's very on the spot. It's very impulsive. It's very just I just got to end it now because when you're making a decision, I don't know. I've never been to that low of a point, but I guess if you're making a decision to end your life, it's so hard to do. Yeah. I can imagine how hard it must be. So you have to do it really. If you don't force yourself to do it in a blink of an eye, you're not going to do it probably. And so I feel like they were able to capture that. And that was like, it was really just tragic.
Yes.
It was hard to watch.
But that intentionally concludes chapter 1, and then it goes into chapter 2, where we get a little bit of, their daughter's life. So the daughter managed to live. The accident, the wife unfortunately didn't make it, but the daughter was able to survive
and was raised by her grandparents.
Yes. And
then eventually ended up just being the grandfather.
So we follow up to her teenage years.
Played by Olivia Cook.
Yes. And it was very short. There was not much to it. It was kind of just like how she is follow-up. It was like a follow-up. Like an
like
epilogue.
Where is she now kind of thing. She was angsty and you know, kind of rebellious and dyed hair and rocked out. You know, she sang a screamo version of "Make You Feel My Love," which I was loving because, you know, "Make You Feel My Love."
Yeah. Bob Dylan.
So,
and that was really the end of chapter 2.
Yeah, it was pretty brief.
And then that's where it felt.
And that's when I'm like, okay, we're gonna go back to this because it was just a random little check-in.
Yes.
So then that's when we were like, I think probably together we were like, okay, this is gonna be one of those full circle films where it all comes, it all connects in the grand schemes of life. So then we go to chapter 3 about this little boy who they've kind of zoned in on, who saw the accident happen.
Yes.
So it turns out he's from Spain. Mm-hmm. He was with his parents. They were visiting
New York.
So then we get the backstory of how his mom and his dad met and how they fell in love. And then they had him, Rodrigo, right? This was his name? Uh-huh. And they grew up in Spain. And this is when we were introduced to Antonio Banderas' character, who I'm so glad he was in this movie. I really, really liked his character.
He was actually my favorite.
He was a sweet, tender man, you know, and he was just lonely, and he just wanted to be, I think, loved and wanted to love people, and had this idea of what he always wanted, a family, but it just never happened for him.
Yeah.
So they were kind of giving us that with him trying to befriend the family, the mom,
not doing anything more than just be around.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it can be interpreted as he was trying to steal and woo her over or something, but according to him, he was just...
And that's ultimately what caused the husband to leave, I guess.
Yeah.
Because he felt like this man... I mean, they were living on the man's property. The man helped their son recuperate after seeing the accident because he got traumatized by it, so they had to go get a specialist to help him, which cost a lot of money. So Antonio Banderas' character was really just kind of generous and trying to help, and I think the father's pride was getting to him, and was, you know, like, I can't provide for my family, so you're gonna basically take over and be the household, you know. So,
which leads us into chapter 4.
Rodrigo, he's grown up now.
We follow he has grown up now as well, and so that just is one of those where we see his journey. He goes to New York for school. His mom is ill, but his mom encourages him to continue on, not to worry about her. So it kind of starts to bring it all together at this point, where we find, we kind of found out in chapter 3, but we find out in chapter 4 really.
We put it together in chapter 3, but we actually saw it on screen in chapter 4, right?
Right. Yeah.
When he was jogging and he ran into Olivia Cook, and here we are. It all comes together.
And they fall in love.
They have a child. And then chapter 5.
The child was telling the entire story.
We're in like 2079 at this point, I think. According to something I read online. We're in 2079. And it's the daughter of the descendant of all of these characters. And she's telling
their story.
The story. Yeah. She wrote a book called Life Itself. And she's talking about all of these... She's telling all these stories through her perspective and the information she was given.
So let's talk about...
So that's the movie.
Let's talk about how it goes wrong. It's not even that it goes wrong. It's just that chapter 1 and chapter 3 are like very big. Like, they take up the most of the movie's time. Yeah. And that's a problem because it's like...
And the most dramatic.
Yes. And you really feel like you're watching two different movies. Yeah.
Like you're watching a set of short films compiled into one movie.
Yes, which is unfortunate as a movie. I know that it's something that is sometimes done in the horror genre where they do, like, you know, mini stories.
Like Tales from the Hood.
Yeah. Or the VHS.
Yeah. You said it's unfortunate. I actually don't mind when movies do that. I like it. I guess it's just one of those to each their own.
But it's not really a movie, though. It's more of
it encompasses an underlying theme, which ties it all of them together. And in this case, they all connected, so it was a movie. It's not like there were 4 completely separate things that they didn't connect. If they didn't connect at all, then that would be like, okay, I just watched 4 separate movies. But since they all connected in some way, and they were in the same universe, I guess you could say, so it made it.
I mean, but I say unfortunate because it's not like you are getting a complete story with one of those short stories. They're intentionally short, and it finishes, and then you get introduced to a whole new set of characters. So I'm saying it's unfortunate in the regards that it's not a movie that you see these characters from beginning to end, as a standard common movie. In the common movie, you know, whatever actors you see, obviously the way the story goes, it goes. But this one was like, for initially, you are like, are we not going to follow up with Will and and his wife and his daughter. Like it felt like it concluded rapidly, not right, and then you start to get to knowing like this entire Spanish family. Then that goes a little bit longer than you probably would think, and then it goes into Rodrigo being a young adult now, and it kind of just like you almost forget about the connection. They make obviously the where the plot is intertwined. It's shown, and you kind of be like, oh, he was the little boy that was in front of the bus when that happened. He was traumatized, but it really feels like it was just two separate stories that generally don't connect. And then when they made it connect, it didn't feel natural. At least to me, it felt like him running into Olivia Cook and falling in love was just a little bit too on the
Well, I feel like they could have done a better job because as soon as they ran into each other, we went straight into they're in love, they're married, then boom, they have a baby. It happened like in a blink of an eye. So if they would have took their time a little bit more and diving into that a little more,
right,
then maybe that would have made it a little more not so movie magic.
Based off of her personality, I don't feel like it matched what he was his personality, because
She was rebellious and angsty and edgy
right.
at the time, and he was this nice European Spanish boy.
It just not saying
they couldn't fall in love, but it seemed like they wouldn't have clicked at that moment.
Right,
like fate wouldn't have had them click right there, and at the points where they were in each other's life. Like his mom just died, and she was pissed off at the world because she never got to meet her parents. So it seems a little odd that they would find common ground somewhere.
And then we were talking about when she finds out that
he inadvertently caused the death of the mom, which ultimately caused the death of the dad, I guess. So that was another thing. That was probably my biggest regret for this film. I wish because at some point that has to come out, right? At some point he's going to be like, how'd your mom, where are your parents? And she's going to be like, oh, well, my mother was hit by a bus while she was pregnant with me. And then he might be like, oh,
I saw that.
When I was a child, I saw a woman get hit by a bus. And she'd be like, well, where? In New York City. That's where it happened. Like, I don't know. It would come out,
It would.
And then who knows how she would take that? She might be like, blame him for what happened and never want to see him again. So I just feel like they kind of just like, let's just sweep this little detail over the rug. We don't really know how we're going to explain this. So let's just kick it to the side.
Really
maybe the audience won't remember.
But it was just one of those. It was like, wait a minute. I understand that they were trying to, future lovers, whatever. But I was just like, they could have been friends or something. They didn't have to go straight into love. I felt like that was probably where it was a little unbelievable and on the unrealistic side. At least where they left us.
It just jumped really quick.
Had chapter 4 been their relationship, then it would have been different.
Yeah, they could have transitioned it a little better. But I am happy that they ultimately did attempt to bring all the stories together and not just leave us hanging on like, okay, Will and Abby's done. We're never going to see them again. They kept intertwining Will and Abby back throughout all the shots and throughout the film, which was nice.
Yeah, particularly the accident scene.
Yeah. And but it was nice. I mean, this movie had flaws for sure, and the critics are hating it and tearing it apart, and it has a really low score on Rotten Tomatoes.
I can understand.
And I get it, but ultimately, I did like the movie. I
didn't like the beginning.
The beginning, I was just confused. We were confused. Like the first 10 minutes, I was like, "What?" But I'm glad they showed us that it was Will writing a fictional story, and I was like, "Okay, well, that makes sense. I can forgive that, or that justifies it," for me. But I thought, obviously, what am I want to say?
I liked the stories for individually for what they were. I don't know if the connecting them was. I get what obviously that was intention and that was purpose. I don't think that helped the movie in my case for this review. I feel like thinking about it, I felt like their individual stories were really, really well told and uniquely told. They weren't all told in the same manner. To me, I still think about the, story that he was narrating his wife's, detailed in how he was kind of there in the moment talking to the therapist, and she was there as well. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of that, breaking the wall kind of, behavior.
Yeah, they were kind of it was reminding me of, Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah.
When he was cold calling all the clients, and he was like, "Hi, sorry to bother you. This is so and so," and him and his desk would drop into their bedroom, kind of in that like kind of the surreal sense of.
Oh, I don't know why you just brought that up, and that the first thing that my mind goes to for that movie now. Oh, the
horse.
Yeah,
the horse people.
That's what that movie. That's sad. That's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not sad, but it did a good job on that.
I feel like though. So you bring that up, saying that him and his therapist were physically walking through memories, and he was like, "Look at me," and they were like, he was able to like touch his old self, and
yeah,
I feel like it was weird because they only did that for the first chapter. They didn't do that for the rest of the film.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like each story was uniquely told in the way, like in Dylan's case, when they were kind of explaining how as a little girl she can't really say what she wants to express. And
so they had those kind of if she could express her words, this is what she would say. If the grandpa could respond to that in a positive whatever way, this is how he would respond.
Right. Exactly.
I like that they did that. That was one of my favorites.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, and then with the Gonzalez family, we get like a nice blend of them, living at that house, growing up, and the son is growing up.
As they're like panning around the kitchen and going. But
so,
I think they sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, each one uniquely told their story. It wasn't like a copy and paste of like
we're gonna use it for this one, and then we're gonna use that same effect for this story, and we're gonna use the same effect for this chapter. Yeah, I did like that, and I was gonna say this kind of was, I feel like, kind of marketed as in the Spanish. Community too, right? I mean, we saw the trailer, Ruben, and it was in Spanish. The trailer was in Spanish, and I was like, "That's weird." I thought it was an English film. So chapter 3 was in Spanish.
Most of it.
Yeah. It was subtitled, but I was, so I get why they're also marketing to Spanish communities as well. But I thought because they were doing that, maybe half the film was going to be in Spanish, but it was only like a quarter of it.
Yeah,
and not even a full quarter.
It felt like a half though.
It was a longer chapter than like chapter 2.
Chapter 1 and 3 were the longest. Yeah.
But dang, I had something I was gonna say too. Well, anyways,
it to me, their individual stories really were very emotionally well written. I think that's my biggest takeaway with this movie.
I'm almost wondering too if they had not tried to bring it full circle and make the Rodrigo and Dylan fall in love, what that would have done too, because their whole thing, and one of one of their premises is kind of like one event that causes a trickle of events afterwards, and how this person can have such a lasting effect on your life and you not even know it, or kind of a butterfly effect kind of thing. If you do this, that happens, then that happens. Right, so exactly. It was kind of that theme, and if you start thinking about that, your mind just starts to hurt, because it's like, then I start like thinking about every event that happened in my life, and thinking, was it meant to be, or was it just coincidence, or is there no such thing as coincidences? Like, you start thinking on a deeper philosophical level. But it would have been almost interesting too, I feel like, if they had just not tried to make them fall in love, or if they had just let the fact that this was just a random boy who saw this tragedy happen, and then we just kind of go along with, well, this is his story and this is how it impacted his life, and not try to force him to not try to meld these two stories together to become one whatever, like them coming together and having a child. It's possible
it might have had a different,
But I don't know. Like, I'm not saying that would have helped the film or had been better.
It would have been kind of more like Crash, akin to like
exactly.
Crash. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was thinking of too. Like the movie Crash. There's other films that do that, but
yes, Vintage Point is another
Vantage Point.
Yeah, that was like an action focused one. And I feel like that would have been probably received better than the whole like, therefore this is how she met him, and it's just kind of like, I get like.
And what was the last character's name? Do you remember her name?
No.
She was like the descendant of all of them.
She was like the last chapter that you're just like, right, the book's done. Like, we don't need to go.
I think though, I mean, since they did decide to go that route, they did decide to connect everyone together through this, love affair between Dylan and Rodrigo, and they had this child. I felt like that the way they did it was nice, that she became a writer, and she was ultimately, I guess, kind of our narrator, if in a sense. They were kind of talking about how you have an unreliable narrator that was Abby's thesis that she was working on in chapter
Yes,
1, which was we were like, dang, we get it.
I get, yeah.
Basically saying that every narrator that has ever existed is unreliable because you only get what is limited by their scope. You only get what they are able to perceive through their lens. Very deep. So her argument is that every narrator is unreliable. The only way you can truly get a sense for something is to watch it unfold before your very eyes. So anyways, that was kind of the whole, what they were kind of going for, like towards the end. And ultimately we were getting different narrators for every chapter, but ultimately, I guess in the grand scheme of things, she was the ultimate narrator, telling us all of these accounts of all these people that she descended from. So that was interesting. And I did appreciate that. I was like, hey, we're going to go in this direction, so why not? And I was rocking with it. I vibed with it.
I really enjoyed those two particular scenes that I really was like the big takeaways from chapter 1, chapter 3. But yeah, to me, the conclusion to it, because I was wondering, where is this narration coming from? Because there was always like a narration in some chapters. Like chapter 1, I think Will kind of narrated his own story. But there was a little bit of narration in chapter 2, and then in chapter 4 with Rodrigo, and a little bit in chapter 3 when they were getting the story going. So yeah, I was kind of just like, where is this narration coming from?
Yeah.
So it was nice to get that conclusion. I think I would rather sacrifice that for more time with Rodrigo and Dylan bonding and actually falling in love.
Yeah, actually seeing.
Yeah.
I feel like they were like, well, dang, we gotta keep our last girl in there, so we gotta cut something out. You know what? Let's just cut out Dylan and Rodrigo's love.
Mistake.
Let's just cut that part out. The audience don't need to see that. We'll cut to them having a baby and they'll figure it out. They fell in love. So ultimately, it is what it is. But speaking of particular scenes that stood out, Oscar, you said there were 2.
Yes, the one that you mentioned about her coming up with her thesis. I don't know. I think it was a combination of performance with the actual idea of the thesis. It was very, very interesting.
Well, she delivered it she was very excited about it, her character.
So I think I got excited with her being excited.
Yeah, it kind of jumped out and
So I was like, wait a minute, okay,
Yeah, I was like, okay, come on, tell me more. Let's go.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Right.
So that was really fun. But to me, the more memorable scene was with Rodrigo's dad and Antonio Banderas' character meeting for the first time, essentially, and it was a really nice conversation. I just really liked the approach that Antonio Banderas was not really getting the man in trouble, or wasn't really having any ill intentions. It was really just getting to know him, because he sees that he picks the fruit differently, and he just was an observation. He was just like, you seem different than everyone else, right. But I hear that you tell jokes and all that stuff. It was just a really nice conversation. I love that Antonio Banderas told a story that was kind of just like, well, get to know me, and then let me get to know you, and the other guy was more conservative, more reserved of what he wanted to say. And he was just like, I'm a simple man. I don't have much to tell you. That's for my coworkers to know, not you. You're my boss.
Right.
You
almost kind of felt bad for Antonio Banderas, right? You almost kind of felt like he was getting rejected in a sense. Like, dang, he just wants to be your friend,
Right.
Yeah, he's your boss, but he hears you're a good guy. He wants to kind of get to see that side of you too. And he was just like, no.
Yeah, I really just liked that moment, because I feel like, one, that's how a lot of us feel. I feel like a lot of times, we don't necessarily associate like, oh, I'm going to become friends with my boss, generally because, they're your boss. So if they find out that you're, drinking a lot outside, it's going to affect their reason to be like, oh, let me have you do this task or something. Like, it can get problematic. I'm not saying that it would be with every, relationship with your boss, but that's a lot of people's minds, that it's like, maybe I don't know if I want to, be too close to my boss. Be good with them, yes, but not be too close to them. So it was a very I felt like that was a realistic take. Even if your boss is just trying to get to know you, it's not more anything else of like, I just want to, sound like you're a good person. What motivates you? Why do you do that differently? Or why do you see your job differently than what everyone else is seeing it as?
Right.
But I felt like it was just a really authentic moment in how a lot of relationships are in the business world. A lot of people are just like, hey, this is business only. I don't need to know your personal life. You don't need to know mine. if there's nothing else we need to talk about business, can I go kind of thing. So
Right.
it was a very nice conversation. I loved the way it was delivered by both actors.
Okay. I totally agree. That was a good scene, and his character in particular, he was one of my favorite characters.
Oh yeah, Antonio Banderas.
Yeah.
Yes. He was my favorite.
He was your favorite.
My favorite. Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, Will was my favorite before he had the mental breakdown, before his wife died, because he was just such a loving guy, and he was so in love with Abby, and he was
in love. Yeah.
And one of my favorite scenes was when it was in the beginning, and she was like, "Are you ever gonna?" Before they were married, before they were dating, she was like, "Are you ever gonna ask me out, Will?" And then he delivered this kind of little spiel about, "I'm waiting for it to be perfect because when I ask you out, there's no turning back for me." And this is, I'm not going to love anyone else. Like, so it has to be perfect. And it was like, I was like, dang,
Yeah.
and it was like,
It was a good answer.
It was a good answer, because I'm like, I mean, the way he said it, he was just like, this is like, there's no turning back for me. Like because basically I'm in love with you. You are it for me. So I want to make sure when I do ask you out, it's going to be the perfect moment because, A, B, and C. So it was it was a really sweet moment. And, even Abby, she was like, basically like, I can't believe he just said that to me, And then there was another scene when they were at their, that costume party thing. And she was basically like, I don't know if I'm ready to be loved like that. And then he was like, I'll love you however you need me to love you. I was like, dang, man, this guy got away with words, don't he? I was into it.
It was maybe a little bit unhealthy.
Maybe, yeah. And that's what I was like. Remember when I was like, maybe, I mean, it's sweet, but it's also a little creepy.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a little, foreshadowing how
right.
emotionally, mentally unstable he could potentially be, and how dependent on, someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting. But that I'm not going to lie, I did really like those moments.
Right. I mean, for anyone, you don't really think of like, oh, in the future, if this happens, that behavior is a sign.
Yeah, you don't assess things like that. Yeah, generally speaking, most people don't.
There's some things that, yes, you can't help but observe for some character traits, but for like natural things where it's like, it just looks like he's in love. You don't really be like, that seems like a mental issue that he might have to,
that he might need some help with one day.
Right.
Yeah.
The moment if she dies, she's gonna.
I know, right?
You don't think that, yeah.
Another scene I did like too was it was one of the more emotional scenes. Sorry. But it was when Rodrigo's mother was dying, and she basically told him to go. When they showed her saying goodbye very kind of briefly in Spanish and saying, just go, you have to go live your life. But then they re-centered back to it towards the end of the chapter, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. And she said, and then this scene was in English, and it was longer, it was more in depth, and she was basically saying, she was saying goodbye,
yes.
Like I'm gonna, but not. And she was saying it, but not saying it like you have to go live your life. Like basically, I'm dying, but she didn't say that.
You living your life is me.
Yeah. So go and live a good life for me. I was like, oh,
it was a very, very good monologue.
Very, very. This Is Us.
I just don't like that it decided to go in English when her character was speaking Spanish. Like I understood the reason for it.
I mean, I obviously did because I'm an English speaker, like primarily. So I mean, but
like I get that. I feel like if the character was talking Spanish, that she knew English to like some extent. It wasn't like she can really say a whole monologue in English. So I feel like that ripped off the the character a little bit. Like that was more of like, let's give you a powerful message,
but say it in English. Even though you were speaking Spanish the majority of the film.
So that was my only I was like, it was a great monologue. I was just like, I felt like you sacrificed the character just to say a good monologue, and that's that kind of impacts in the way you receive it, because they're just like, why are you saying this in Spanish? Like everything else was in English. Everything else was in Spanish.
And it probably would have been even more like deep and emotional in Spanish. Like
I feel like the Spanish audience got ripped off.
Yeah, I know, right? Like it's like, we're already only getting less than a quarter of this film in Spanish.
Like, ¿Qué está diciendo?
And now you're gonna say like one of the most like great parts, like the best monologue in this chapter. You're gonna say it in English and take that away from us?
¿Qué dijo? Enough? ¿Qué es enough? No sé qué es enough.
She said basta. I heard basta.
I feel like that's probably that. Yeah, I feel like that was a little unfair to just be like, oh, just kidding. We're gonna put on the English audio now, just for a little bit.
All right. Well, it's still my favorite scene. So
It was. I mean, the speech itself, the monologue was really.
It's not my favorite scene. I'm sorry, but it's one of my favorite scenes. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Oscar, after everything, after all the reviews, all the flaws, all the different ways this film could have gone, what do you decide to give this film?
I'm not gonna be like the critics, because I'm better. Just kidding. No, I'm actually gonna be really, really plus for this movie. I'm giving positive, because I feel like it succeeded in making you be emotional and also reflect. I feel like that's always a good thing for a movie to do or have an impact on. So yeah, this is going to be a 3.5.
Ow.
It still had its flaws that, I feel like as a movie you probably should have been aware of. As a TV series, by absolute means, take your time, do these 4 chapters, do what you got to do to conclude it in a nice bow. But as a movie, you definitely have to think different in terms of spacings and pacing. It was just, like, I feel like the movies that we referenced that kind of do different perspectives had a nice pace to them where you didn't feel like you were just focused on one character too long. It's kind of like they needed to have a timer to be like, okay, go. All right, it's 5 minutes. We got to cut to the other characters. We got to check in on everyone else. Which, I mean, This Is Us does well. It's not like This Is Us doesn't do that well. It does it well, too. So, not sure exactly for Dan.
It's just able to do it over, a longer expanse of time.
So yeah, and I mean, it had a lot of great characters, and I think that was a good thing that it had a lot of great characters. It played with death, the theme of death, but I don't think it gave us.
Yeah, it did.
It gave us different perspective about deaths. I feel like it was just kind of like
it just made me go, well, damn, I could die at any moment. And die tragically.
It was like one of those that it was a surrounding theme, but they didn't tackle death differently, and I felt like that was the
only time they made me feel kind of good about it was with Rodrigo's mom, because she had cancer, but like she was saying, you living your life is of me, or whatever she was saying.
Yeah, she had an opportunity to say that.
And
you don't want to go say that on everyone to like the today. Like you can't just go to anyone and say this, goodbye speech, because then you'd be like, oh, I'm not, 45 years later, here I am, but I gave you that great goodbye speech. So it's kind of like, those, that's a rare opportunity when your time is coming to be able to say goodbyes in that way.
Oh, and speaking of, I just want to tackle this one, not tackle it, but touch on it. We were both saying we really liked Antonio Banderas' character. He was a really good man. He also even called the husband,
oh yes,
her husband, when she was dying, and he knew that she will always love him. Like, he before they started getting together, she was like, I'm not gonna love you the way I loved him, and he was like, okay, like he was fine with that. So like, can you imagine like somebody telling you, I will never love you the way I loved that person, and you're at peace with that? You're like, I know, it's okay, because
he didn't want the love. He wanted the love, but not like that.
But he didn't need like this fluffy, like we're madly in love with each other kind of thing. He just wanted company.
Yes. Which, I mean, they explained it that was. I don't like that they kind of didn't show it, and then they show it later on where he says like this, oh, I want you to include me and keep me updated on what's going on. And then they threw in like, oh, Antonio Banderas' character actually loves to write, so it was a great opportunity for him to be able to do this. And it was just like, why didn't you just put that in the original when that happened at that first time, rather than be like, there was actually more, guys. It wasn't all done there.
They're trying to surprise us, Oscar.
I don't know. I feel like you can still surprise us by telling us right then and there. But it was a nice moment to see that he came back. Although I'd have been like, no. I mean, it's a tough reaction to be like, you left. Doesn't mean you can just come back and say goodbye. I don't know. Yeah. The son wasn't there, so the son never got to even see his father either.
Yeah, true.
So. True. But yes, excellent point.
Okay, so 3.5 out of 5 is what you gave it.
What's yours?
I'm gonna be a little more generous, and I'm gonna give it 4 out of 5. I know this movie had a lot of flaws. It did. I get it. We explained them. We expressed them. I agree with some of the critics. However, I personally, Donnie here, I liked the film. It was emotional. It was an emotional roller coaster. It gave me just like. It was tugging on every part of my heart, and there was, sentimental moments, there were tragic moments, a lot of sadness. There was, there was excitement, there was everything. I mean, I think that one of the reasons I responded so well to it was because the trailer didn't really show you anything. So it kind of felt like it was kind of like a simple favor. Like we didn't really know what we were gonna get. Like we got, I mean, with a simple favor, you got a little more. You knew the story. You knew a girl was missing, but that's all we knew. So your expectations aren't set that high to begin with. So going into this film, I had no idea. Like the trailer shows you nothing really, other than who's in it. So I was like, okay, well, we'll see it. We'll check it out. And I was moved. I really was. And I mean, just on a deep level, like just the philosophy of the movie, you know, and it just gets you examining your own life and thinking about certain moments that may have shaped, you know, where you are now, or, you know, carved the path that you took, you know, or the lane you took instead of that lane, that direction instead of this direction you took in life, that choice you made instead of this choice. So, you know, I think it was a really just kind of not eye-opening movie, but it really just makes you look at your life and makes you kind of re-examine things and just look at things like, okay, makes you look at life in a way maybe you didn't look at it prior to watching the movie. Not saying I have this new outlook on life, but I am now thinking about life a little bit differently, even if it's just for like only 30 minutes after the film.
So you're gonna follow up on This Is Us and binge watch?
Yeah, I need to finish.
Get more?
I know, more? Right? I want more. I need more of this. But I think the stories were interesting. The performances were great. I loved them. All the stories I was into. You know, the one that I kind of maybe didn't love was just Rodrigo's story as a grown man. Not so much like the scenes with him and his mother were fine, but like him being in college and the scenes with his girlfriend and you know, that stuff I didn't really care for, I guess. But everything else about the movie, I was totally into it, and yeah, I just think it's a good one. I think Ruben should see it.
I will.
He's not gonna see it. Yeah, but I think you should. Sorry. But yeah, so I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I am. I think 3.5 would be not generous enough for me, so I'd rather give it a 4 out of 5. But listeners, we want to know what you guys thought. Hopefully you side with Oscar and I and you thought it was really good. But if you were more on the side of the critics and you thought it had a lot of things it could have worked on, you can definitely let us know. Drop us a comment. You know, we totally respect opinions, whether it's on our side or the other side. So let us know what you guys thought of the film. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you guys next time.
Until next time.